Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be a Storm Spirit build for patch 7.36a, because we're already in the A patch, and the main reason I'm making this is because I think Storm is a really good hero now, probably one of the most broken heroes in this patch, and you can even see on Dota 2 Pro Tracker and other places people are picking it a lot. The win rate's not the best, but it is still decent, especially after a bunch of other things got nerfed. But the main reason that I think this hero is going to be good, and especially good in pubs, is the passive. And this is kind of the main change to the hero. Is if you played Dota 5+ years ago, I'm not exactly sure when they changed Bloodstone, but it used to be that Bloodstone gave you charges every time you killed somebody, or I think in the AoE of a kill, kind of like Pudge's passive where he gets tankier, except the Bloodstone would give you more regen, and so you'd be able to just stick on the map. Like if you snowballed the game, got a bunch of kills, you'd be able to stay on the map, have a ton of regen, and just be constantly zipping on people and killing people with Storm. Now this passive is basically that. Now the number comparison, I'm not exactly sure how the numbers compare to the old Bloodstone, but I can tell you how it feels is if you start snowballing the game and getting, 2, 3, 4, 5 kills early on, you will just have infinite regen. It feels so good with the bottle and the runes plus the bounty runes. It's just kind of insane. Like you almost never have to go back to base. Even if you spend all of your mana, if you have good items, good mana regen items, and you're snowballing, like you will have full mana even if you farm the jungle. Like it's kind of ridiculous what this passive does now. So that's the main reason, especially for pubs, because I think you can snowball the game a lot easier in pubs with this hero. It's kind of like wreaks havoc. And then briefly, I'll just say Shock Collar's a good one, I think, to pick if you just want to not really have to worry about doing anything. You just kind of get this free extra damage, because this basically means if you initiate on somebody and you pull them in, it's just harder for them to fight back, and you don't really have to think about it. It's just easy extra damage, something extra when you're going and initiating on someone. So for the most part, I would think you can pick that and just be safe. The static slide, which I'll show you, it's the one I'm going to demo when we go in here, so I'll just go into the demo right now. The static slide is more of like a skill-based one, where because you actually put the I'll just level it up first, because we're going to level this first anyway. You actually have like a range, and you can click it over in that range, and the remnant will walk in that direction. So it's more of a skill-based thing. I mean, you can still click it like on top of you, so it's not that big of a deal, but it offers some misplay, but it also offers a ton of like potential in play making, where you can like send it towards a creep for last hitting, you can send it towards an enemy. There's a lot of good things you can do, so it's obviously higher skill cap. It's better probably than the other facet, but the other facet is just simpler. So if you're not like a huge Storm Spirit player, you're just trying to learn it, you can just pick the other one and be safe. But regardless, let's just jump into the item build first before we actually get into all the skill build. And so the first thing for starting items is going to be really simple. This is a lot of the same stuff you're going to be getting on almost every mid hero. You're going to be getting tangos, 2 branches, a fairy fire. You can actually go with like another branch or even 2 if you want, if you think you're going to be really confident on getting that bottle early. But honestly, to stay safe, I'm going to just get the 2 branches, maybe a 3rd, but at the end of the day, I want to get the bottle like 100%. So if I have like a good early lineup where I think I might get a first blood or at least get 2 runes, you might go for 3 branches. Otherwise, 2 is fine. I mean, it is going to help you last it if you get more, but still, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because getting bottle early on is super important, obviously, because you're so reliant on mana even in the laning stage to get last hits and harass and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's going to be the first thing you're doing, is going for bottle. Then we want to go for at least 1 null talisman, and that's just kind of default. You're probably going to get that next every time. Then from there, you can kind of switch it up depending. You can get magic wand if you're who you're laning against is spamming spells. If they're not really spamming spells, I almost wouldn't really get magic wand until later on, until like you start running around and fighting more. Otherwise, you can opt for 2 other things. You can get another null talisman, because 2 are going to be really good, and that's the main reason, is because of the max mana. I mean, you do get that mana regen, but the max mana bonus is extremely good for heroes like Storm who are reliant on the mana, and you're going to have a bunch of mana anyway. Like you're going to be buying a bunch of mana items and all these kinds of things. So that percentage increase is going to be really good. So buying 2 is not that big of a deal. Now, the other thing is, if you don't want to get that second one, you can just go straight into boots, straight into treads. And I would do that sometimes, especially if it's a lane where I'm like not going to get too aggressive, or maybe I'm a little bit scared and I'm going to be jungling more, because the boots is just going to help you walk to jungle camp, stack, and get back to lane, all that kind of stuff. So you might even, like before you get the second null talisman or even finish the magic wand, you might just go straight up brown boots and then get the treads later once you finish these small items. It just depends on the game. There's a lot of things to consider with that. But the early game, you're going to round it out mainly with this kind of inventory, maybe one less null talisman. Then for core items. So if you check like Dota 2 Pro Tracker, maybe other builds, you're going to see people buying like Witchblade or maybe even Kaya first. You will see people buying Orchid, but not every game. I'm going to tell you, buy Orchid every single game if you are playing pubs. I mean, it just is what it is. You're probably watching this. You're not like a 10k MMR player. You're not a high Immortal player or maybe even an Immortal player. I would say, even if you're 6k, 5k, you should probably buy Orchid every single game unless there's some crazy obvious dispel. But even then, like I've played against Legion, I've played against these heroes with dispels early on, and it doesn't matter because they're not going to be coordinated enough to actually use that dispel and sit in the back and wait and, be good at playing the map. And the reason for that is, the main reason you want to get this is because it helps you get pickoffs, and pickoffs are the thing that is going to help you snowball with your passive, get more regen, stay on the map, all that kind of stuff. It's like the number one thing. Now, yes, if there are dispels, these other items can help you get pickoffs too, but the Orchid is just going to be way better. Obviously, you zip in, you see a guy farming, you're pretty sure he's alone, you zip in, you silence him, you pull him, you do your combo, all that kind of stuff. You're going to kill him. It's going to be really good, especially because he can't really fight back, and you're going to get that like extra burst at the end with the damage based on all the damage you do. So it just straight up is the better pickoff item, obviously. And you should be able to get this early enough that people aren't buying, like, they're not going to get Manta soon enough and stuff like that. Now, sometimes heroes will rush Manta, and that will happen, but your supports aren't going to be rushing Manta. Like, you're still going to be able to pick off the supports. It's going to happen. So that's why I'm going to get Orchid every single game. And Orchid is really good right now compared to like other patches maybe in the past 5 years ago. You used to be debating between Bloodstone and Orchid, but Orchid's really, really good right now straight up because it gives you that attack speed. It gives you literally everything you want. Like, there's nothing bad about it. And this hero loves attack speed. So that's why I just really like Orchid. Then I want to go into Witchblade. Just because, yes, I like Kaya Sange, I like the Kaya, stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, it is good. There are some games maybe I would do that and skip the Witchblade, but to be honest, this is another item that just gives you everything you want because you want that attack speed. It also upgrades into Parasma, which is insane on the hero. Just makes you do even more damage, which is ridiculous. And so again, even though you're not seeing this bought every single game, it's bought a decent amount by pros, and you're seeing people favor Kaya and stuff earlier more. I would say you can just get this because it's going to help you snowball even more, and you're going to want to upgrade it later. Then I would go into Kaya Sange. And the thing is, some people like don't really buy Kaya Sange, or maybe they only buy the Kaya and they don't fully finish it, especially because now they nerfed the mana loss reduction or mana cost reduction based on Storm's ult. So that is a downside. And honestly, that's one of those things when you read it, you probably thought, oh, Storm's not going to be that good this patch. But the ult or the passive makes up for it completely. And you get all of these items. You just have so much mana, you don't really care that much. Yes, it makes that initial jump or those like the team fights, you maybe aren't having as much, you're losing more mana than you otherwise would, but still, it's insane. You are going to have way more regen. It's still going to be good. This item is still good to get regardless. So I would usually get that in most games, but sometimes I'm going to say these are the 4 items that you're going to get, or the 3 items you're going to get almost every game, but sometimes you may want to get another item like before Kaya Sange or even before Witchblade. I would almost always go Orchid, but you're going to want to get like a BKB or something else like that because there are just a ton of threats in the game. Let's say there's a ton of lockdown, there's a ton of stuff that can counter initiate, and you're just getting stunned, you are getting killed, and you're not being able to snowball, or you just know that you need this BKB because if you don't get it, you're going to die, you're going to feed, and then you're going to lose some of those charges from Galvanize, which is important. You obviously don't want to do that, just in general, but for Storm, it's even more important because of that snowball nature. So sometimes I will just interject BKB into that randomly. So I have that in late game items, which we can move on to now, but I will say you will be buying this sometimes, before some of these other items. And that's another thing to talk about is that in the Dota 2 Pro Tracker or other builds or whatever you want to see, people will be buying Eternal Shroud, and sometimes they'll be skipping BKB. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're wrong. That can be good. Some games you don't necessarily need BKB, and that is correct. But for the most part, in your pubs, I would get BKB just because it is the kind of the safe choice. You're not going to die as easily. It makes it so hard to deal with you that I just don't think it's the wrong choice. If you don't feel like you need the BKB that badly, then just get like all these 3 items and then go BKB later. Honestly, that's what I would do. I just wouldn't go for Eternal Shroud because it is one of those things where it did get nerfed. And yes, it is pretty good. It's giving you more mana, but really mana isn't the issue these days. And like that magic resistance is kind of whatever. Yes, strength and health, it is good at making you tanky, but again, I just feel like the zipping around is more important than getting the pickoffs. It's not the tankiness that's the issue, it's the lockdown. It's not the mana regen that's the issue, because you should be snowballing. It's the lockdown. So that's why I really like BKB. And again, because you have to put into context that all these top MMR players, the really high MMR players, they're playing around supports that are much better at dispelling, much better at saving, they're much better at using their spells efficiently, and so getting tankier is definitely way better. So I'm not saying that, like in those games, so I'm not saying this is a bad item. You can definitely buy it, it's definitely good in some situations. It's just, I would say this is kind of the default of what you should be thinking, and then you can move on to those more like complex situations after you've kind of gotten used to the stable baseline of what the hero should do. So that's kind of just putting the theory on all of these items, because I think those are the main items. Then we can get into the simple stuff. Late game, you can get the shard, you can get the ags if you need to. If you feel like you're going into an AoE and pulling a bunch of people in, you can obviously upgrade to Parasma. You can upgrade to Bloodthorn. Last item you can probably get for even more lockdown is Scythe. These are pretty much straightforward items. It's really not that big of a deal, or there's not much to talk about. It's pretty obvious there why you would get a lot of these items after you get your main items here. So then we can move on to situational items. I think Lincoln Sphere and Eternal Shroud are the two items that you're like going to be buying a lot. Lincoln's, there's so many games where, that's kind of like Eternal Shroud, is these items just are in place of BKB. You're like, okay, I don't really need a full BKB. All they have is like one single target spell that I need to avoid, and that's literally it, and I'm free to just run around the fight otherwise if I don't get hit by that. So Lincoln's, boom, there you go. Very simple, very easy. Gives me mana regen, gives me all the things that I want. So I'm gonna be buying Lincoln's like in a lot of games, even though it is a situational item. Then from there, there's all just like random stuff. I mean, Revenant's Brooch, not really popular anymore. You could totally, use this. It does give you some things that you want, but it's just not, it's like really expensive and not great. You can get Shiva's again. Decent item, kind of fits the hero, but not fully fits the hero like some of these other items. Boots of Travel is definitely possible, especially late game. You can get Ethereal Blade, but again, it's not the best because you're E-blading people, and then you're not going to hit them. So it's a little bit awkward, but it's possible to get it. It's just a little bit weirder. Like maybe if you're using this in combination with Ags or something like that, yeah, that would make sense. MKB I actually do like personally. It's just more of like you're going straight up right click, because this hero does love attack speed. It just helps you do more damage, helps you also kill something like a Wind Ranger or PA or whatever after they have a BKB or that's gone or whatever. You can definitely do that. It's definitely an item you can buy, even though you don't think of this hero being a right click hero. It does right click pretty hard sometimes, and that's the same thing with Mjolnir. Like this can be pretty good, giving you attack speed, giving you things that you want. It's just like this is like above and beyond just getting a straight up item that doesn't give you any stats, any mana regen. Like you feel like you have enough of it, where a lot of these other items like Bloodthorn, it gives you some of everything you want, including the damage and attack speed. So those are those main items. Then Aeon Disc if you're against like a Faceless Void and you just need to survive, and then you're good, or something like that. Yules you'll get maybe against a Silencer or something, because it might be a little bit awkward if you get like Orchid BKB. It might feel like you just need the Yules first or something, or even second. That can feel weird sometimes. I think the main one is Silencer, maybe Skywrath. Otherwise I wouldn't really be buying Yules too many times, but it is decent, especially because you can upgrade it to Wind Waker later. And then lastly, for items that we can get Meteor Hammer. And you see I kind of skipped ahead here because I leveled up the Electric Vortex and I got the Meteor Hammer. And it's not really that you want to combo the Meteor Hammer, and I'll show you why. Because like you can do this, but like it's not the best. It definitely works, but it's not really what you want to be doing on the hero. You don't want to be just sitting there like channeling that. You're probably going to be doing more damage by right clicking, using remnants, zipping back around, using more overload charges, all that kind of stuff. So in that way, it's probably not the best to get. The reason why you get it, actually, if you look at it, is it has 75% mana regen amp compared to the Kaya Sanj, which has 50% mana regen amp. That's like the main reason. It's just the mana regen amp is way better, and that's honestly one of the biggest things you're going to be wanting, because now that mana loss reduction doesn't work on the channeled spells, so it doesn't add that extra benefit. So it's like very situational. I wouldn't really buy it too much, but it is one of those things that can help you get more mana regen if you feel like for some reason you're having an issue with that, but everything else is fine. So that's the item build. Now let me reset my hero here, and we're going to go with the skill build, and I'll show you all about that. We'll level all the way up to 25 there. Hopefully your ears aren't bleeding if it's not too loud, because for me it is, because it's louder in my ears right now than it is for you. But First, it's going to be very simple. You're getting Static Remnant every single time. There's almost no reason why you would go anything else. Obviously, the passive doesn't work if you don't have another spell. And then, like, I wouldn't use Electric Vortex, like, for First Blood. I just would never do that. So get Remnant level 1 and then Overload level 2, because now you're comboing these two things where you have the Remnant, and then obviously when you use it, it gives you that extra right click to get last hits or harass. You're mainly using this to harass, honestly. In the lane, you use the Static Remnant like next to the range creep or something like that, or next to creeps you're going to last hit right at the perfect moment because it does a good amount of damage, and then you're going to right click the enemy and it gives them, you know, it does damage to them, it gives them attack slow, all that kind of stuff, which is really great. It just helps you in the lane. Then third, I like to go for Electric Vortex. This is something that I would say, obviously, every single game, it's not right to go for your pull level 3. That's not something that happens every single time, because some lanes, it's just like, you can never get aggressive. You can't get close enough to them to actually pull them in anyway. It's just not going to be that great. So sometimes it's better to go, like, in your third point, just get another point in Static Remnant. But for the most part, I think just generally speaking, because you need to learn how to be aggressive with this hero, because he can be really powerful, you want to get that third point in Electric Vortex so you can like pull the enemy in. Because what you're going to be doing is you just kind of like pull them in, right click them, and then use your Remnant and then right click them again, and that can dish out insane amounts of damage. You can definitely get kills with this hero in the lane early in the game, like level 3 instantly once you first pop it, because you have that stun, you have like those 2 hits from Overload, the Static Remnant getting popped on them. It can be very, very powerful, especially if up until that point you've been right clicking them down and kind of wearing them down, that kind of thing. So that's why I usually like to get that level 3. It also can save you sometimes as well if you're getting dove or whatever. So then we're going to just be maxing out Static Remnant when we can, and then getting our ult, and then getting Static Remnant, you know, there. So that's how it's going to be. Then we're going to max out Overload. We're going to, I'm going to deal with the talents once we're done with the skills here, but you're going to be getting your talent every single time you can, because they are very important. And then obviously you get your ult whenever you can, and then the last thing you're going to max out is Electric Vortex, just because these two spells, like this spell is the best right now for farming and for doing damage, all that kind of stuff, clearing the creep wave, and then this just adds again to the farming speed and to pick off speed, and that's just how it's going to work. It's pretty much just the default build, or you know, skill build for every single game, unless they change. In the past there's been things where you go more points in Overload and stuff like that, but it's just not the case right now. Just unless they change around the numbers or something like that. So it's pretty straightforward, honestly, for skill build. Not too much to think about other than that third point in potentially Electric Vortex or Static Remnant. And then for the talents, you're going to be getting these every single time you can, 10, 15, 20, 25, like I said. And the first one is going to be regen pretty much every single time. Now this, you know, attack range when overloaded, I don't know, it's kind of awkward, not really super reliable. You just want to get the mana regen every single time because it is so good. Then 15 is kind of the one where it's like, okay, which one do I actually get? I would say if you're snowballing super hard, you don't feel like you can get killed, you're just like, it feels unstoppable for you, you just want to snowball harder, you can get Static Remnant damage. But some games, if it's more contentious, if it's more like a tight game and you feel like sometimes you could live with a little bit of extra HP, you do need to be careful. So you can get that 250 health, because that just helps you get a little tanky. This hero doesn't buy a ton of health items other than maybe potentially BKB, Kaya Sanj, stuff like that. Like, you can get tanky later, but those earlier items, you're not really getting a lot of health. So this can be a really good one to get. This just helps you more when you're snowballing. It's just kind of like, are you going all in for damage, or you mainly want to initiate and your team is doing a lot of damage, that kind of thing. Then for 20, this Electric Vortex duration is just going to be really good, not only because it just helps you with the pickoff, it helps you stun somebody longer, but because later in the game you're going to be getting ags for the most part. Like, even if it's not the best ags game, you're going to get that eventually, like if it goes really late. And so this is just going to help with that, pulling everybody in that AoE for a longer duration, setting up more Static Remnants and more damage, all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, this one is kind of a contentious one where I think in the past, like years ago when this was first introduced, people were picking this ball lightning, you know, as you travel a certain distance. But really the Overload attack bounce is way better for farming, and it's also way better like just for clearing creep waves in the late game, obviously for pushing, split pushing, or if you're defending like mega creeps or something crazy like that. Now obviously this is the ball lightning like remnant is really good for clearing creep waves if you're like sitting in fountain against mega creeps, I guess, you know, that's really good obviously, but that doesn't really help as much with team fights and late game, like, you know, just in the team fight doing a ton of damage, because you can't really control where the ball lightning is as much. So it's good in losing games if you're like balling from fountain to clear the creeps and stop people from pushing, or like, you know, initiating on people and then TPing back or whatever. But that's a little bit cheesy. This Overload attack bounce is just better overall. Plus you can get the shard, which is really good. and it just helps everything with the damage. It just buffs it all up, and so that's, I think, the better one overall for most situations, other than those specific, like I said, mega creep situations where you're losing, you need to clear waves, all that kind of stuff. So that is the build for Storm Spirit in patch 7.36a. I know this was a bit of a longer one, but there was a lot of things I wanted to talk about in there to kind of give you an understanding of how to play the hero and the fundamentals of the hero, because I think if you can really understand what you need to do in this hero and play him effectively, you can absolutely crush games. He's kind of one of, you don't think of Storm as like a cheese hero, but in some ways he really can be a very like cheesy hero from the mid lane, where if you know how to play him, you can snowball out of control, take control of games, and absolutely dominate them, especially now with the passive. So that's the build for the hero in this patch. If you like the video, remember to like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.